Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be my November TBR, and transparently, I'm a little shocked, a little concerned that we only have 2 months left in this calendar year, but nevertheless, I'm excited about the books I've picked out today, despite my reading mood feeling very, very random as of late. But before we dive into the books themselves, first a word from the partner of this video, which is Rosetta Stone. I'm so excited to say I am partnering up with the iconic Rosetta Stone. I'm pumped to be working with them again because honestly, the New Year's is sneaking up on us. Those resolutions are going to be here before we know it. And personally speaking, I love having language as one of my resolutions. I'm a big travel person, and I think trying to learn some of the language of any new place you're going to is really important and also just helps with your overall travel experience. And what better way to do that than with Rosetta Stone, which is one of the most premier and successful language services out there. But what makes Rosetta Stone different? It's because they don't rely on direct translations. It's not about just learning a whole list of vocabulary words and sending you on your way, but instead focusing on immersing you and teaching you the language in the most intuitive way possible. Also setting you up for success because it's more about connecting and being able to speak and interact like a local through conversational speech. The lessons themselves are immersive, matching audio from native speakers to visuals, reading stories, as well as participating in dialogue. My personal favorite feature is the voice recognition tool, which basically matches your audio to audio of native speakers, giving you feedback on how well you're pronouncing the words, which I find to be so truly helpful. Another thing I love is that they actually have an app allowing you to basically access all of your language lessons on the go, making it so easy to fit into your everyday life, from your commute to errands. It just makes the whole thing so seamless. I, of course, have an incredible offer to share with you guys. Through my link and code, you're able to save 60% off their lifetime membership. That's right, a lifetime membership. After you sign up, you'll never have to pay a renewal fee ever again, which I think is amazing. If you guys are interested in learning more about Rosetta Stone or accessing my incredible offer, I will again have everything linked down below. But thank you again to Rosetta Stone for partnering with me and supporting this video. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into my TBR. Now, as I mentioned, my November TBR is a little bit random. I'm excited about all of the titles, but my reading mood has been so all over the place. I have not been following lists all that well, so I decided to just kind of gather books from all of my favorite genres to give myself as many choices as possible. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. The first book that's on my TBR is Rouge by Mona Awad. This is one of my most anticipated releases of the year. Mona Awad also wrote Bunny, which is one of the strangest, most compulsive books I simply have ever read. I kind of describe her books as like if an A24 movie was a novel, because it's truly a very unique experience, if you know what I mean. This is Mona Awad's newest release. It just came out last month, and the synopsis just sounds, again, absolutely bananas and unlike anything I've ever really read before. And I'm curious to see how the whole thing is going to unfold. But this follows our main character, Belle. And for as long as Belle could remember, she's always been really obsessed with like skincare and beauty, to the point of like almost being a bit unhealthy. At the beginning of this book, she receives notice that her estranged mother has actually tragically passed away. So Belle decides to travel back to Southern California to attend her mother's funeral. There she meets a very strange individual who basically lets Belle know that her mother was part of like this cult beauty spa group, and then Belle is invited to like check out their space, and then she kind of gets involved with this cult beauty spa group. Again, it just sounds very, very strange. I also feel like this might be commenting quite a bit on like beauty standards and those types of things as well. I've also heard good things about it too. A gothic horror Mona Awad story, say no more. I'm going to be reading this book. The next book that's on my list is Cersei by Madeline Miller. This is a book that's been on and off so many different TBRs of my life, and I just don't know why I have not read this book yet. I have read The Song of Achilles by this author, and I did really enjoy it. I feel like I have a rather large backlog of like ancient retellings that I need to get to, so I thought, you know what, let's start with Cersei at the very least, because this is one I feel like that's been on my TBR perhaps the longest. But this, of course, is the humanization and sort of reimagining of the tales surrounding Cersei, who is a very famous witch from the well-known classic The Odyssey. It follows Cersei first in her childhood, and then as she's banished to her own deserted island by Zeus. And I think kind of her exploration of power and her becoming more powerful in her magic, and also again as she is targeted by men and God alike. I'm curious about this. Obviously, this is a highly beloved book, and at this point, I just feel like I need to get to it before it gets any more embarrassing. But again, a backlog of classic retellings. I am most excited, I think, about this one, so let's hope I actually read it. Then I have some fantasy series I want to continue on with. I kind of fell into a John Gwen black hole over the past month, which restructured my TBR for the rest of the year, let's say. So there are some authors I have not gotten to that I really want to before the end of 2023. A book that is definitely at the top of the list is Rise of Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. This is the second bind-up in the Raya Revelation series. I read the first bind-up, Theft of Swords, a few months ago and liked it. It definitely wasn't mind-boggling. It wasn't my favorite fantasy book I'd ever read, but there was something very endearing and homey about the narrative style and the character interactions between our two main characters that I also found it to just be very entertaining, and I'm just looking forward to kind of falling back into this world and story. But in this book, we follow and are introduced to our two main characters, Royce and Hadrian. They're two mercenaries and kind of like BFFs, let's say, and they travel the land taking on various odd jobs that are very dangerous. At the beginning of the first book, they're hired to steal a sword, which they do, but then they are very quickly framed for the murder of the king, and everything is sort of turned upside down from there. Every book kind of follows our main characters as they take on a new job, but are also being further and further pushed into the politics of the land. I read and loved Michael J. Sullivan's The Legends of the First Empire series. This is set in the same world, but thousands of years in the future. So it's also really fun to interact with and see all the various Easter eggs there. I've heard the second book takes a rather large step up in terms of quality. So I'm also looking forward to that. But honestly, I just love Royce and Hadrian together. I like the humor. I love the familiar structure of just like a classic fantasy tale that this is. I just feel like this could be a really good time. And I also desperately want to get to Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie. I need to read a Joe Abercrombie book by the end of this year. I had big plans to make this the author of 2023 for me, but it ended up being Michael J. Sullivan and John Gwen instead, which is fine, but it's not too late for me to actually start some of his standalones and maybe even progress to his other series before the end of 2023. This is a standalone novel that I believe takes place in between his two series. We follow the daughter of some well-known characters, and she is actually a very successful mercenary until she is betrayed. And so our main character from there is bringing together a ragtag group of individuals to get her revenge, and I love to see it. I love the concept. I love the setup. I feel like this is going to be funny and dark and gruesome. Joe Abercrombie writes really compelling, really dynamic, and like what should be very hateable characters, but somehow makes them your favorite characters that you will ever interact with. I really love character-led fantasy, and I feel like Joe Abercrombie does that so well. I also feel like this is going to be gruesome and bloody in all of the best ways, so we have to read some Joe Abercrombie before the end of 2023. The next book that's on my TBR is Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. I read Red Rising in the month of September, and I thought it was okay, if I'm being fully transparent, but obviously this is like one of the most beloved fantasy sci-fi series out there. I did a whole reading blog on reading Red Rising, and many people told me that the quality of the story takes a huge step up in Golden Sun, and the series really finishes out much stronger than its initial introduction with Red Rising, so I'm deciding to trust you guys and check out book 2. I will be doing a vlog on this book, but if you're not familiar, the Red Rising series is set in like a futuristic sci-fi dystopian fantasy sort of setting. We're introduced to our main character Darrow, who is a red. In this world, society is incredibly stratified, and it's stratified by color, with different colors having different access to power and also having to participate in different jobs. Darrow, being a red, is at the very bottom of this hierarchy, with reds being relegated to the worst forms of labor and are treated the worst within society. And there's also a lot of misinformation, and they're being lied to by the government. Something occurs at the beginning of book 1, resulting in Darrow getting involved in rebellion, kind of willing to give up everything in his life to take down this structure. From there, Darrow gets transformed into a gold, which is the most powerful color within this society, and he like enters this school competition. It turns very like Roman military competition very, very quickly. There's a lot of inputs in book 1, some of it successful, some of it not. I'm looking forward to see it maybe getting better within book 2. I'm gonna hold out on my opinion on this until I read it, but it is on my TBR for this month, and I'm looking forward to kind of like seeing where it takes me. I will say, it does read quickly. It does have that. Next book that's on my TBR is the Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. I flew through the first 2 books in this series in the month of August, and honestly, we're just delighted by the setting, the concept, and the characters so much. I have kind of been putting off this 3rd and final book, I think in part because I don't want the series to end, but also you guys have kind of scared me a bit about this final installment. I'm not sure if it's because it's emotional or if it was bad, but I'm a little concerned, to say the least. This is the 3rd book in the School of Mance series, and in it we're introduced to our main character, Elle, and Elle lives in a world where magic exists. But being a magic user is actually incredibly dangerous, especially when you're a fledgling magic user who doesn't have a lot of control over their power, because there are monsters that roam this land trying to basically eat you. As a solution, a magical school was created where all of the kids from different magical families can live and learn and hopefully be protected from these monsters. And instead of having like a 1 in 20 chance of surviving, they now have a 1 in 4 chance of surviving. The school is dangerous, it's dark, it also creates very complicated situations where kids form like alliances with one another. There's lots of privilege, there's lots of isolation. It's a very harrowing place to live and to go to school. Story, again, we're following our main character, Elle, who's very much a self-imposed loner. She's also a very powerful magic user, though she tries to hide it from everyone around her. Throughout the series, we see her take on not only the powers of the school, but also begrudgingly make friends and kind of change the whole fabric of the School of Mance itself. I really enjoyed the first 2 books so much. I loved the narrative style, I loved the characters, I loved the growing connections and everything about it. So I'm looking forward to see how the whole thing is going to wrap up. I feel like it could be emotional. The books prior to this have had some insane cliffhangers, so I'm also very curious to see what is going to happen next. The next book that's on my TBR is Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey. I feel like I started out really hot at the beginning of this year reading the Expanse series. I flew through a few books, but then I took a long break between reading book 5, which I did give 5 out of 5 stars, to starting book 6, and it's just time that I get back to the Expanse series and read more. I have really enjoyed the process of reading this. Obviously, I've made it to the 6th installment, so it's definitely very good, but I'm looking forward to being back in this very high-octane, plot-forward sci-fi series. In this series, we're introduced to a huge cast of characters, but we kind of have a primary core of characters, and that is through our main character, James Holden, and his ship crew. This series is set in kind of a near-futuristic society where humanity has kind of expanded beyond the borders of Earth, and now there are governments on Mars, the moons, and a series of space stations called the Belt. All of these governments hate each other for a variety of reasons that are very complex and nuanced over many, many generations. And conflict and tension is definitely on the rise at the beginning of book 1, and everything sort of comes to a head when our main character stumbles upon a piece of ancient alien technology, and things begin to spiral out of control from there. Book over book over book, we're introduced to a new kind of micro and macro problem, which I feel like the authors just balance so well. We get to know our main characters more, we get to know a very specific issue more that our characters have to work to try to solve, but the actual larger scale political landscape continues to grow and balloon out of control in such an overwhelming fashion. Books are very hard to put down, and I'm just looking forward to getting back into it. I obviously really enjoyed the previous installments, so I need to continue on and read more. So I have book 6 on my TBR. The next book on my list I'm so excited to pick up, and that is The Hexologist by Josiah Bancroft. Josiah Bancroft is just truly one of my favorite authors, and so when I saw he was coming out with a new book and a new series, I knew I had to read it right away. I feel like he just combines like such dark and whimsical concepts with fantasy settings. He's also able to make very compelling characters while still having very engrossing plot lines too, and this book just seems absolutely right up my alley. And in the story, we are following our 2 main characters who are a married couple that live in a city and basically spend their time solving very strange and very difficult like hexes that need to be broken. They're very well acquainted from the weird, and they've never shied away from a very challenging case. So when the royal secretary comes knocking on their door, pleading for their help, they decide to travel to the castle to see what's up. And what's up is the king is trying to bake himself into a cake, and nobody knows why. Obviously, this kind of throws the kingdom that they're living in into peril, possibly turning the nation on its head, and it's up to our 2 main characters to try to solve and figure out this hex. This just sounds, again, like a great combination of humor and intrigue, strange and peculiar. I'm also hoping this is the first book to a rather long series. I think it'd be so fun if there's there's like a new mystery or hex of the week to solve. I just feel like this will be a fantastic book. I love this author, and I just want something that's like strange and inventive, will also keep me on the edge of my seat. The next book that's on my TBR, I am truly embarrassed I have not gotten to it yet, and that is He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chan. Hello! How have I not read this book? I loved She Who Became the Sun by the same author, and this is the final novel within this historical fantasy duology. I think I've just been putting it off because I don't want it to end, but I cannot let this landslide into not reading this book for 2 years, which I sometimes let happen, and I hate when I let that happen. This historical fantasy series is often described as Mulan meets A Song of Achilles, which I do think is a rather apt way to describe it. It is so fantastic. It's multi-POV, and we're following a variety of characters all sort of wrapped up in this very large conflict happening in China at the time. But I would say our primary character is named Zhu, and we follow her from a young age. She is from a very poor peasant family, and after the tragic passing of her parents and her brother, she actually takes on the identity of her brother as well as his destiny. We follow Zhu as she joins a monastery posing as her brother to gain an education, and then also get wrapped up in rebellion and quickly move through the ranks of this rebel army. Again, this book is just so interesting and so multifaceted. The writing and the characters themselves are incredibly dynamic. There's so many different concepts at play. The fantasy writing, the historical writing is excellent. There's also a lot of discussion of queer identity within this book as well. It's just so good, and I need to read this book. I've only heard fantastic things about it. I feel like it's gonna break me, but it's gonna be so excellent. Next book that's on my TBR is a book I started a few months ago, was obsessed with it, and then put it down, and for some reason I have not circled back to it, which is just wrong. So the book I'm talking about is The Spear That Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. I've only read about 100 pages of this book, but it was one of the most like unique and interesting fantasy experiences I truly had ever experienced, and I think I'm just gonna restart it and hopefully read the whole thing through, because this I feel like has a chance of being like one of my favorite books of the year, one of my favorite books ever, and I just want to give it the space and time it clearly deserves. But structurally speaking, I've never read any book quite like this book. This book is told like a story, but it's a layered storytelling experience that is just so wholly unique in every way, shape, or form. But essentially, this book is a tale within a tale within a tale, and the story that we are experiencing is that of a really powerful and evil royal family that has kept a god enslaved and trapped within their castle for many generations, and this is why they have their power. And then from there, we follow as this god is broken out and kind of brought across many different landscapes. But again, this is a story that's not told in a straightforward fashion. The writing style and just the narrative structure of this is just truly astounding. I need to restart and finish this book this month because I loved what I've read so far. And the last book that's on my November TBR is There by Tommy Orange. This is a literary fiction story I just feel like I'm going to love so much. I also feel like it's going to be very emotional and be one that's going to stay with me for a long time. This is a story that is told through so many different perspectives. We're basically following lots of different characters as they all make their way to the same powwow. I personally love the structure of seeing and reading from so many different people's lives and kind of getting this sense of this larger tapestry of humanity and experience. And this book is said to do that with such skill and such wonder. I've literally heard nothing but amazing things about this book and the author's writing style and just everything about it. This is also a book that's been on my TBR for too long and one that I definitely want to prioritize reading this month. And just in general, I need to get back into my lit fic reading because I love lit fic and I'm just not adding it into my TBR as effectively as I should be. You know what I mean? Alrighty guys, those are all the books I hope to read in the month of November. Please let me know down below some books you hope to get to this month, as I would love to know. Again, big shout out to this video's partner, which is Rosetta Stone. I will have my special offer linked down below if you are interested. But thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye!